What I got here is a note that I wrote myself of what I wanted my dream laptop to be. I wrote it years ago, but when I migrated all my notes from iPhone to Android, I lost the date that I created this. So let's see if we can figure out when I created this note. This note starts with Dream Laptop. Alienware has a couple models that are upgradable. However, they are Intel based, so you couldn't upgrade to the new gen CPUs anyway. That's still true. Pretty much every generation of CPU has a tick and a talk where they have a slight upgrade, maybe next gen, but it's basically the same CPU. They use that same motherboard chipset, but then when they have a big improvement, then they use a new motherboard chipset. That's still true about Intel. And I don't think Alienware still supports those upgradable laptops. So that was a while ago. I don't think Alienware has come out with a new upgradable laptop in years. Then I put a little facepalm emoji in the note. My next laptop, I want an AMD system that I can swap the CPU, storage with 2 M.2 slots, RAM, and Wi-Fi Bluetooth card. I still want that. That would be sweet. Not a whole lot of laptops will let you swap out the CPU, and it doesn't really make sense to do that because of motherboard chipsets. So unless you're buying a bare bones laptop and getting the CPU somewhere else for cheap, it doesn't really make sense to have a laptop that you can swap out the CPU. I also want 10 gig RJ45. Wow, Will. Whoo, all right. Still don't think there's a laptop out there that does that. USB 4 Type-C, I don't think anything has USB 4 yet. I've seen maybe 1 or 2 things that have USB 4. Still not a thing. As well as a few USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2 Type-C. That naming system, though. SD card reader, okay. I make videos, that makes sense. If I'm out there with my laptop and I'm taking pictures, it makes sense to have an SD card. Anymore, I have this A7S III, and I use CFast cards, so I just have a CFast dock that is USB-C. So I would have to specifically put an SD card in my A7S III and tell the A7S III to write to the SD card and plan ahead if I wanted to do something like that. So a little outdated, still nice to have an SD card reader. Headphone to 1/8" TRS with optical surround. Oh, wow, that's ambitious. So Apple, this was probably written back when I was still an Apple fanboy. Apple had a few models of laptops that had an 1/8" TRS headphone jack that you could put an optical cable into and be able to output surround sound. So that was an Apple thing. I don't know if any Windows laptops did that. It would be cool. A little ambitious and a little useless because I don't really have an optical surround sound, so what would I use that on? Some sound bars have optical. Then I have a smart TV, so why would I plug my laptop into my smart TV? So this was definitely a few years ago when I didn't have a smart TV. I needed my laptop in order to watch Netflix. Interesting, but Netflix doesn't have surround, so with the optical, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then I say, and a line-in 1/8" TRS. This was definitely back when I was working at CAE, recording podcasts. I was recording events through the soundboard, so it was convenient to plug in the main sound mixer, record that audio into maybe Logic Pro. That makes sense. Would I need that nowadays? No, most of the time I carry a little USB interface in my laptop that's battery powered. It gives me much better preamps. I'd prefer using the USB interface. I wouldn't rely on the laptop's ADC. I would want to bring my little Tascam audio interface, rely on Tascam's ADC. It's not great, but it's better than any laptop. The next line is with a smooth 120 hertz 10-point multi-touch trackpad. with Apple type gestures? What? This was definitely written when I was an Apple fanboy. You want a nice big trackpad, 120 hertz trackpad? That's a little bit slow for a trackpad, if I'm being honest with you, Will. 10-point multi-touch. That's a lot of points, but cool. 5 points really all you need? Very ambitious, Will. Apple type gestures. I don't think Windows has that, so I guess I could put Linux on the computer and get gestures like that. Interesting. Okay, next line is magnesium chassis or at least aluminum. All right. High quality. Good taste. Good taste. All right. MagSafe power port and standard Volex locking IEC. A barrel jack that is magnetic, maybe? But you're not going to get MagSafe on a Windows laptop. That's just not going to happen. Maybe there's something out there. Put in the comments if you know of like an adapter that you can use on your regular laptop that's like a barrel plug laptop that would be like MagSafe, where it's magnetic, and if you kick the cable, your laptop doesn't go flying off the table. Okay, so MagSafe power port with detachable cables so that they can be easily replaced. Okay, so I used a MacBook for years, and I had to replace so many of those stupid chargers because the cables would fray all the time. There was that FrayFix gelatin thing that I put on there to help, and I had to resolder some of them because I couldn't afford to buy another one, so I fixed them myself with little $7 kits you can get on Amazon. Did I ever make a YouTube video about that? Probably not. It's not very safe, and I end up burning up those chargers anyway because Apple always puts cheap components in their laptop chargers and then puts them in this plastic chassis which overheats, which is stupid, but I guess Windows laptops do that too, but usually it's bigger, so there's more space for the components to heat up. Detachable cables that can be easily replaced. Definitely good. I can see my frustration back when I was using my MacBook because it's so freaking annoying when the cable's frayed. I spent so much money, and years ago I didn't have any money. I don't have any money now, but I really was poor. Like, we were living paycheck to paycheck, and it was hard. So every time my MacBook charger would die or fray or burn out, it was detrimental to my bank account because, you know, Apple charges an arm and a leg for their cheap power supplies. I went on a search for a better quality power supply on Amazon, and I think I made a video about that one. It eventually burned up too, but it was rated for 110 watts, which I thought would mean that it wouldn't burn up, but eventually it burned up too. I think the battery I have in my MacBook is probably bad. So it was wearing out my charger. PSU capable of 300 watts. Wow. I don't think they make those. Not for laptops. I think 230 is the limit, maybe 240. Put in the comments if you've seen a 300 watt laptop PSU. I think 300 watts is a little bit too much heat to generate in a plastic chassis. You would have to have some sort of metal heatsink on your thing. I've seen a laptop that had two 130 watt chargers, and the laptop could plug both of them in, and you could use like the high-end GPU that was in it. But yeah, 300 watts. Don't think they make that, Will. Okay, display settings. Let's see here. 17 inch. Ooh, I do like big displays. 1080, 1080p. Okay, 60 hertz. Okay, all right. IPS or OLED. Very good. Okay, color calibrated. Oh, wow, fancy. I guess 1080p would be fine on a 17-inch display. These are 1080p and they're 27 inches, and I'm happy with them. I can kind of see the pixels, but not when I'm working. Like, I'm not focused on that. It doesn't bother me. So I could understand 1080p on a 17-inch laptop would be plenty, but 60 hertz? I mean, realistically, how often do you want to burn up your battery running 120 hertz? But 120 hertz is so nice on this phone. And why would I want to downgrade on my laptop, 60 hertz? I mean, realistically, most of the time I'd probably put it down at 60 hertz to save battery life, but then, I could bump it up when I want to bump it up, right? Oh, 2070 Super GPU. Okay, that can tell us about the time that I wrote this note, because the 2070 Super was released on July 9th, 2019. So this note must have been written in the latter part of 2019, after the 2070 Super was released. Okay, so we figured out when I wrote this note, 2019. Back then, I was working at the CAE as a tech support, and I was really frustrated with my MacBook, even though we kind of were required at work to have MacBooks, because then we had a uniform software base, to everybody had the same software that they were running. A lot of these frustrations, a lot of these overcompensations would have been because I was running a MacBook. I was getting frustrated with Mac OS. I don't think in 2019 I was quite frustrated with Mac OS. I think I still wanted to build a Hackintosh back then. But this wouldn't have been a Hackintosh if I had an NVIDIA GPU in it, because you just can't put NVIDIA in a Mac. Couple high-end Noctua fans that are quiet even at higher RPMs. Okay, apparently I was concerned about quiet. This must have been when I was recording a lot of audio. Now, I got this big PC running on the top of my desk, and the fans are going, and I put that big 1600 watt PSU in this thing, and the fan is extremely loud. I need to put a Noctua fan in the PSU and figure out how to run a wire up to control the fan speed. It's so loud. You probably can't hear it on the mic though, so that's good. Noctua fans in your laptop. Don't think that's probably not a thing. I don't think anywhere. I want all this in a chassis that is less than 2-inch thick. Not very ambitious. There's 2 inches is all. I mean, this is probably less than an inch, honestly. So 2 inches is not ambitious at all, Will. And weighs less than 10 pounds. 10 pounds? 10-pound laptop? This is like 6 pounds. 10 pounds? Wow. Leaving a lot of space for cooling, I guess. And I want it to cost between $1,000 and $6,000 from base model to high end. Okay, all right, so flexible on specs. All right, okay, and when I say base model, I'm talking Ryzen 2300, 4 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabyte NAND SSD, because I can upgrade all that later. I might even have some of that laying around. No. And then I write, the last line is, dream laptop right there. Mic drop. As if any of that made any sense. Oh, I was so naive. I knew nothing about computers back in 2019, honestly. I had been running Apple since 2005 or whatever. I knew nothing. Anyway, this is fun. This is funny. $1,000 to $6,000. I don't really think you can get much of upgradability in a $1,000 laptop. There are some Clevo laptops. Wootware has a bunch of these Clevo laptops that are upgradable. RAM, obviously you could swap out the motherboard, and that would swap out the CPU. I think they even had a couple models where you could swap out the AMD CPU without having to swap out the motherboard. And RAM, storage, Wi-Fi card, you could swap all that out. So the Clevo is probably the closest thing to upgradability. But here lately, there's been a new company called Framework that has made a 13-inch laptop that is very serviceable and very upgradable. But it's a modular system where they have modules that you buy to upgrade these rather than off-the-shelf parts. So a lot of the parts you would have to get from Framework. So if they ever went out of business, your laptop would not be serviceable for the most part. I mean, M.2s and RAM would be fine, but motherboards, no. And since you can't swap out the CPU, no. But like we talked about before, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of swapping out of CPUs. Once you've got the highest end CPU, that's the end of the chain, because the next generation comes out and you need a new motherboard. And if Framework goes out of business, then you're not getting a new motherboard. We'll see what happens with Framework. I hope they survive. I think they've got a great business model, and as long as they don't overextend themselves, it should be fine. 10 gig RJ45 and a USB 4 Type-C. That was a little ambitious. USB 10 gig is fine for most applications. And as far as RJ45s, most of the time, I guess if I was editing video on the laptop and I wanted to plug into a NAS, but if I'm plugged into a NAS, I'm probably home. Why wouldn't I just use my desktop? So I think the 10 gig RJ45 is, one, not existent, but two, a little bit overkill. I mean, 1 gig, 2.5 gig, plenty for a laptop. Really, you just need the RJ45. At my previous job, I was doing a lot of IT network maintenance. I would need to plug in the RJ45 in order to control certain devices, certain routers, certain Blackmagic video switchers, and so on. So that's what the RJ45 would be used for, and you don't need 10 gig for that. That's way overkill. A lot of these other specs, I can completely understand where I was coming from. The trackpad, that's something. Magnesium chassis, yeah, I get where I was coming from here. Yeah, if I got a laptop like this, I'd be pretty dang happy. Yeah, I would. Cool. Tell me what your dream laptop is in the comments. I'll see y'all later.